The bitter winter wind howled across the barren plains of Arizona Territory as Patience, Barrett clutched her worn medical bag tightly to her chest, the stagecoach lurching beneath her. A violent cough racked her slender frame, and she quickly pressed a handkerchief to her lips, the familiar specks of blood a grim reminder of why she had traveled so far from her Boston home in 1882. She was dying, and her last hope lay in a marriage to a stranger, and the special medicine she carried her final chance at survival. Wade Lawson stood at the edge of Quartzsite's only road, his weathered hat pulled low against the setting sun. At 32, he had built his ranch from nothing, but the loneliness of the frontier had finally driven him to send away for a bride. As the dust cloud of the approaching stagecoach appeared on the horizon, he shifted nervously, wondering what sort of woman would agree to marry a man she'd never met, in a town barely worthy of a spot on the Arizona map. The coach rolled to a stop, and Wade straightened his shoulders. The driver hopped down and opened the door, offering his hand to the passenger inside. A small, pale hand emerged, followed by a woman who looked as if a strong wind might blow her away. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest hat, but it was her eyes that caught Wade's attention, deep green and filled with a determination that belied her fragile appearance. "Miss Barrett," Wade stepped forward, removing his hat. She nodded, another cough seizing her before she could speak. When she recovered, she offered a weak smile. "Mr. Lawson, I presume. Please call me Patience." Wade rushed forward as she swayed slightly, taking her arm to steady her. "Are you all right, madam?" "Just tired from the journey," she said, though the lie was transparent. "I'll be fine once I've had some rest." Wade nodded, not wanting to press the issue. He collected her trunk and medical bag, noting how she refused to relinquish the latter, keeping it close as if it contained something precious. "My wagon's just over there. It's not a long ride to the ranch." As he helped her up onto the wagon seat, Wade couldn't help but notice how light she was, how the bones of her wrist felt like a bird's beneath his calloused fingers. This wasn't the sturdy frontier wife he'd expected, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet strength that made him think perhaps she wasn't as fragile as she appeared. The journey to the ranch was mostly silent, broken only by Patience's occasional coughs and Wade's awkward attempts at conversation. "The house isn't much," he said as they crested a hill, revealing a modest but well-built cabin with a barn and corral behind it. "But it's solid. Keeps out the cold and the critters." "It looks lovely," Patience said sincerely, taking in the sweeping vista of rugged beauty that surrounded them. "Truly, Mr. Lawson, Wade, please," she smiled. "Wade, then, it's more than I expected." He helped her down from the wagon, steadying her when another fit of coughing threatened to topple her. "Miss Barrett, Patience, are you sure you're all right? You seem unwell." She straightened, clutching her medical bag tighter. "I should be honest with you, Wade, I am ill. Consumption, the doctors in Boston called it. They gave me a year at most." She spoke matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "But I have hope. This bag contains a medicine experimental from Europe. My father was a doctor, and he had colleagues who sent it just before he died. I believe it can help me, but I needed to get away from the city to clean air and open spaces." Wade's heart sank. He'd sent for a wife and instead had received a dying woman, but as he looked into her determined eyes, he couldn't find it in himself to be angry. "Why didn't you tell me in your letters? Would you have still wanted me if I had?" she asked simply. He had no answer for that. Instead, he picked up her trunk. "Let's get you inside. You must be exhausted." The inside of the cabin was modest but clean, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and 2 doors leading to what Patience assumed were bedrooms. Wade set her trunk down by one of the doors. "This will be your room," he said. "I'll sleep in the other. I know we're meant to be wed, but I won't hold you to that contract, given the circumstances. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Tears sprang to Patience's eyes at his kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, "but I intend to honor our agreement if you'll still have me. I may not be the wife you expected, but I can cook and clean, and I have some medical knowledge that might prove useful out here." Wade studied her for a long moment before nodding. We can discuss it after you've rested. For now, make yourself at home. I'll see to dinner." That night, Patience took her medicine, a bitter-tasting tonic that she measured carefully into a small glass. Wade watched from across the room, his brow furrowed in concern. "Does it help?" he asked. "I believe so," she replied, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "My father's colleagues said it would take time to see improvement, but I must be careful with it. There's only so much, and I don't know when or if I can get more." Over the following weeks, a tentative routine developed between them. Patience, despite her illness, proved herself remarkably capable, transforming the bachelor cabin into a home with small touches, wildflowers in a jar on the table, curtains sewn from fabric she'd brought, meals that actually had flavor. Wade found himself looking forward to returning from his work each day, drawn to her quiet company and gentle humor. For her part, Patience grew stronger in the clean desert air. Her coughing fits became less frequent, though they never disappeared entirely. Each night, she carefully measured out her precious medicine, and each day she ventured a little farther from the cabin, exploring her new home with increasing vigor. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Wade finally broached the subject they'd been avoiding. "The preacher comes through town every third Sunday," he said. "If you're still of a mind to marry, he'll be here this weekend." Patience turned to look at him, studying his sun-weathered face. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way, but there was a kindness to his blue eyes, a steadiness she had come to rely on. "Are you sure that's what you want, to marry a woman who may not live to see next winter?" Wade took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I sent for a wife because I was lonely, Patience. These past weeks with you have been the happiest I can remember in a long time. However much time we have, I'd rather spend it with you as my wife than wonder what might have been." Tears filled her eyes as she squeezed his hand. "Then yes, I would be honored to marry you this Sunday." The ceremony was simple, held in Quartzsite's small church with only a handful of Wade's neighbors as witnesses. Patience wore a dress of pale blue that Wade had insisted on buying from the general store, saying a bride deserved something special. They exchanged vows, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Wade's kiss was tender, as if he feared she might break. That night, as husband and wife, they shared the larger bedroom. Wade's touch was gentle, his patience infinite as they discovered each other. For Patience, who had come to Arizona expecting at best a business arrangement and at worst a lonely death, the tenderness she found in Wade's arms was a revelation. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Wade's arm protective around her waist, he whispered, "I want you to know I'll do whatever it takes to help you get well." She pressed closer to him, savoring his warmth. "Just having you beside me helps more than you know." As spring turned to summer, Patience's health remained stable, neither improving dramatically nor worsening. She diligently took her medicine each night, but Wade couldn't help noticing how the level in the bottle decreased steadily. One evening in July, after a particularly bad day of coughing, he found her staring at the bottle with fear in her eyes. "How much is left?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bed. "Perhaps enough for another month if I'm careful," she replied, her voice strained. "I've been taking less each day, trying to make it last, but it's not helping as much that way," Wade finished for her. He took her hands in his. "Patience, is there any way to get more? Someone we could write to?" She shook her head. "The doctor who supplied it was a colleague of my father's from Vienna. I have no way of contacting him directly. The medicine itself is experimental, not available in regular pharmacies." Wade's jaw set with determination. "There must be someone who can help. What about in Tucson?" "It's a bigger city, might have doctors who have heard of such treatments." Patience didn't want to crush his hope, but she'd already exhausted such possibilities before leaving Boston. "Perhaps," she said non-committally. The next morning, Wade was gone before dawn. A note on the table told her he'd ridden to neighboring ranches to ask about doctors in the region. He returned that evening, dusty and tired, but with a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Old man, Jenkins over at the Circle J said there's a doctor in Prescott who studied in Europe." Supposed to be the best in the territory, I'm going to take you to him. Prescott was a 3-day journey by wagon over rough terrain that would be taxing even for someone in perfect health. Patience tried to protest, but Wade was adamant. "You're my wife," he said simply. "I promise to protect you. Let me try." They set out the following day, the wagon packed with supplies and blankets to make Patience as comfortable as possible. The journey was difficult, just as she'd feared. The jolting wagon aggravated her condition, and by the time they reached Prescott, she was weaker than she'd been in months. Prescott was considerably larger than Quartzsite, with proper streets and multiple businesses. Wade found them a room at a decent hotel before seeking out Dr. Harrison's office. The doctor, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver temples and a neatly trimmed beard, agreed to see Patience immediately upon hearing her symptoms. After a thorough examination and many questions about the medicine she'd been taking, Dr. Harrison sat back with a thoughtful expression. "Mrs. Lawson, I'm familiar with the experimental treatments coming out of Vienna. In fact, I corresponded with several doctors there during my own studies. May I ask the name of your father's colleague who supplied this medicine, Dr. Friedrich Muller," Patience replied, hope rising in her chest for the first time in weeks. The doctor's eyes widened. "Muller, extraordinary. We studied together briefly. His work on pulmonary diseases is quite revolutionary." He turned to the cabinet behind him, unlocking it with a small key. "As it happens, I have been experimenting with similar compounds myself, based partly on Muller's research." He removed a dark bottle similar to Patience's nearly empty one. "This is not identical to his formula. I've made some modifications based on my own observations, but the principles are the same. I believe it could help you." Wade stepped forward. "You're saying you can provide more medicine, similar to what she's been taking?" "Better, I hope," Dr. Harrison said. "And I can continue to supply it as needed. But Mrs. Lawson, I must be clear, this is not a cure. It can slow the progress of the disease, perhaps even halt it for a time, but consumption remains one of medicine's greatest challenges." Patience nodded, her hand finding Wade's. "I understand, doctor. But even time is a precious gift when you've been told you have none." They left Prescott with a month's supply of Dr. Harrison's medicine and instructions to return when it ran low. The journey back to Quartzsite seemed less arduous somehow, buoyed by the fragile hope they now carried. Summer faded into fall, and with the cooler air came a noticeable improvement in Patience's health. Dr. Harrison's medicine, combined with the dry Arizona climate, seemed to be working better than her original supply had. Her coughing fits became less severe, and she gained back some of the weight she'd lost. Wade watched the transformation with cautious optimism, afraid to believe too completely in her recovery lest fate prove cruel. But as the weeks passed, he couldn't deny that his wife was growing stronger. She took to accompanying him on his shorter rides around the ranch, her face gaining color from the sun. Their love deepened through these months, evolving from the tender affection of their early marriage into something profound. Wade, who had never been a man of many words, found himself telling Patience things he'd never spoken aloud about his childhood in Texas, the death of his parents to fever when he was 16. His dreams of building something lasting in this harsh but beautiful land. Patience, in turn, shared her own past her sheltered upbringing in Boston, her father's dedication to medicine that had inspired her own interest, the gradual realization of her illness that had coincided with his death, leaving her alone and frightened. "When I saw the advertisement for a bride," she confessed one evening as they sat by the fire, "I thought perhaps it was a way to die with dignity, to be useful to someone in whatever time I had left. I never expected to find." "What?" Wade prompted when she trailed off. She smiled, the firelight catching the tears in her eyes. "Love," she said simply. "I never expected to find love." In November, they made their second journey to Prescott. Dr. Harrison was pleased with Patience's progress but cautioned them against complacency. "The disease can lie dormant, only to return with greater force," he warned. "You must continue the treatment without interruption." As they prepared to leave his office, the doctor held up a hand. One moment, I've received a letter you both should see. He retrieved an envelope from his desk. It's from Vienna, from Dr. Muller himself. I wrote to him about your case, Mrs. Lawson, and his response just arrived yesterday. The letter, when read, contained both concerning and promising news. Dr. Muller had refined his treatment further and believed the new version could provide even greater benefits. However, he also confirmed Dr. Harrison's warning that the disease was unpredictable and prone to resurging. The most significant news, Dr. Harrison said, tapping the letter, is that Muller is planning a lecture tour of America next spring. He intends to visit San Francisco and possibly other Western cities. If you could consult with him directly. We'll go, Wade said immediately. Wherever we need to, whenever he arrives. As winter settled over the Arizona territory, bringing rare snow that dusted the desert landscape like powdered sugar, Patience and Wade celebrated their first Christmas together. The cabin, now truly a home, was decorated with pine boughs and candles. Wade surprised her with a silver locket containing a small portrait of them both, taken during their last visit to Prescott by a photographer with a modern studio. "So I'll always be close to your heart," he said as he fastened it around her neck. Patience's gift to him was unexpected in a different way. "I've missed my monthly courses for the second time," she said softly, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Dr. Harrison confirmed it before we left Prescott. We're going to have a child, Wade." The joy that transformed his face was matched only by the fear that followed swiftly after. "But your health, is it safe? Dr. Harrison believes the pregnancy might actually benefit me, strangely enough. Something about the changes in a woman's body during this time can sometimes slow the progression of consumption, and I'm stronger now than I've been in over a year." She squeezed his hands. "I want this chance, Wade, to create life, even as I fight to preserve my own." He pulled her into his arms, his cheek resting against her hair. "Then we'll face it together like everything else." The winter months passed slowly, with Patience's pregnancy progressing alongside her continued treatment. By February, her condition was showing clearly, her dresses needing adjustment to accommodate her changing figure. Wade hovered attentively, insisting she rest more and taking on additional household duties despite her protests. In late March, a telegram arrived from Dr. Harrison. Dr. Muller would be in San Francisco in May and had agreed to see Patience based on his colleague's recommendation. The journey would be challenging, nearly 2 weeks by stage and train, especially with Patience now 5 months pregnant, but the opportunity was too important to miss. They set out in early May, traveling first to Prescott to meet with Dr. Harrison, who provided them with detailed notes on Patience's case to share with Dr. Muller. The journey to San Francisco was arduous, despite the relative comfort of the train for much of the distance. Patience bore it stoically, though Wade noticed she used her medicine more frequently to combat the fatigue and stress of travel. San Francisco was unlike anything either of them had experienced, a bustling metropolis with grand buildings, crowded streets, and the constant scent of salt air from the bay. They found lodging in a modest hotel recommended by Dr. Harrison, close to the medical college where Dr. Muller would be lecturing. The Austrian doctor was a small, intense man with piercing eyes and a manner that was both brusque and compassionate. He examined Patience thoroughly, reviewed her history, and questioned her at length about her response to both his original treatment and Dr. Harrison's modification. "You present a fascinating case, Mrs. Lawson," he said finally, his accent thick but his English precise. "The combination of the treatment, the dry climate of Arizona, and remarkably, your pregnancy, appears to have created optimal conditions for managing your condition." "Does that mean she's curing herself?" Wade asked, hope evident in his voice. Dr. Muller held up a cautionary hand. "Not curing, Mr. Lawson. The bacillus that causes tuberculosis is stubbornly resistant to elimination, but controlling. Yes, I believe your wife's body is currently holding the disease at bay quite effectively." He turned back to Patience. I have developed a new compound that I believe will be more effective than what you're currently taking. Dr. Harrison can produce it for you in Prescott, following my formula. But more importantly, I want you to understand something crucial. Your improvement is not solely due to medicine. Patience leaned forward, her hand instinctively going to her swollen abdomen. What do you mean? The environment you've created, the dry air, good nutrition, rest, and I suspect happiness, these are powerful factors in managing tuberculosis. I've observed this pattern in many patients. Those who find purpose and contentment often outlive their prognosis by years, sometimes decades. He smiled, a surprisingly warm expression on his severe face. Continue as you have been, Mrs. Lawson. Take the medicine, yes, but also live your life fully. That may be the most potent treatment of all. They returned to quartzsite with renewed hope and Dr. Muller's new formula, which Dr. Harrison promised to prepare for them by the time the baby was due. The journey home was easier somehow, despite Patience's advancing pregnancy making travel more uncomfortable. The knowledge they carried that her improvement was real and could continue lightened their spirits enormously. July brought scorching heat to the Arizona desert, along with the arrival of their son. The labor was difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, during which Wade paced outside their bedroom while the midwife from quartzsite attended Patience. When he was finally allowed in, the sight of his wife exhausted but radiant holding their tiny son nearly brought him to his knees. "Come meet William," Patience said softly, using the name they'd chosen to honor Wade's father. William Frederick Lawson. The baby was small but healthy, with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's green eyes. As Wade took his son in his arms for the first time, he felt a surge of protectiveness, unlike anything he'd experienced before. This child, born against such odds, represented everything he and Patience had fought for: hope in the face of despair, life defying death's shadow. The weeks following William's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries. Patience recovered more slowly than most new mothers, the birth having taxed her already compromised strength. But the new medicine from Dr. Muller, which arrived as promised, seemed to help her regain her footing more quickly than Wade had dared hope. By William's third month, Patience was strong enough to resume most of her normal activities, though Wade insisted on hiring a local girl, Maria, to help with the heavier household chores and the baby when needed. At first, Patience had protested the expense, but Wade was adamant. "We can afford it," he said firmly. "The ranch is doing well and your health is worth every penny." As William grew, so did the ranch. Wade's careful management and hard work had expanded their holdings and cattle herd. By the following spring, they were prosperous enough to begin building an addition to the cabin, 2 more rooms to accommodate their growing family and provide space for Patience to establish a small dispensary. Her knowledge of medicine, combined with the remedies she'd learned from her father and Dr. Harrison, made her a valuable resource in quartzsite, where the nearest doctor was still in Prescott. She began treating minor ailments for their neighbors, finding fulfillment in using her skills to help others. On William's first birthday, as they watched him take his first tentative steps across the cabin floor, Wade pulled Patience close. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" he asked quietly. "If you hadn't answered my advertisement, if Dr. Harrison hadn't known Dr. Muller." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with the clear green eyes that had captivated him from the first day. "I try not to dwell on what might have been," she said, "but I do thank God every day for bringing me here to you. When I stepped off that stagecoach, I thought I was coming to Arizona to die with dignity. Instead, I found a reason to live." Wade kissed her then, a kiss full of the love that had grown between them through hardship and joy alike. "You brought the medicine that saved your life," he whispered against her lips, "but you saved mine too in a different way." By William's second birthday, Patience's health had stabilized to the point where Dr. Harrison, during their biannual visit, expressed cautious optimism. "The disease appears dormant," he said, listening to her lungs through his stethoscope. "I can't promise it will remain so forever, but many patients in similar circumstances have enjoyed decades of good health. That fall, patients discovered she was expecting their second child. The pregnancy was easier than her first, her body stronger and the morning sickness less severe. Wade watched her anxiously nonetheless, ready to rush her to Prescott at the first sign of trouble. But patience bloomed, her cheeks rosy and her step light despite her growing belly. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born in the spring of 1886, a robust baby with her father's blue eyes and a healthy cry that echoed through the now expanded house. William, not quite 3, regarded his sister with solemn curiosity before declaring her too small and returning to his wooden horses. Life settled into a rhythm of quiet joy. Wade expanded the ranch further, hiring 2 hands to help with the increasing workload. Patience's small medical practice grew as word spread of her knowledge and gentle manner. They made regular trips to Prescott for her treatments and supplies, but the shadow of illness receded further with each passing month. In the summer of 1887, a letter arrived from Dr. Harrison with bittersweet news. Dr. Muller had passed away suddenly in Vienna, but not before documenting his treatment methods extensively. More importantly, his work had gained recognition in medical circles across Europe and America. New research was building on his foundations, offering hope for more effective treatments in the years to come. He gave me the gift of time, Patience said that night as she and Wade sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in fiery hues. William and Elizabeth played nearby, their laughter a counterpoint to the distant cries of coyotes. Time I never thought I'd have. Wade took her hand, his thumb tracing the calluses she'd earned through years of ranch life, so different from the soft hands of the frightened young woman who'd arrived on the stagecoach 5 years earlier. You've done more with that gift than most do with a lifetime, he said. Look at what we've built together. She followed his gaze across their property, the sturdy house that had grown from a bachelor's cabin, the thriving garden she'd coaxed from the desert soil, the healthy children who represented their hope for the future. Beyond that, the community connections they'd forged, the neighbors whose lives had been touched by Patience's healing skills and Wade's quiet generosity. It's more than I ever dreamed possible, she admitted, leaning her head against his shoulder. When I left Boston, I carried medicine I hoped might extend my life by months. I never imagined finding a cure. Wade's arm tightened around her. The medicine helped, but Dr. Muller was right about what really saved you. It wasn't just the tonic or the desert air. She smiled, understanding. It was love, she said simply. The medicine for my body came in bottles, but the medicine for my soul came in finding you, in building this life together. As the sun sank below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land they'd tamed together, Wade silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought Patience Barrett to quartzsite, a mail-order bride carrying medicine and hope in equal measure. The consumption that had threatened to take her had instead led them both to a life richer than either could have imagined alone. The years that followed brought both challenges and blessings. Wade expanded their ranch into one of the most successful in the territory. Patience's small dispensary evolved into a proper clinic as quartzsite grew alongside the expanding railroad. Their children thrived, William showing his father's aptitude for ranching, Elizabeth developing her mother's healing touch. Patience continued her treatments, though with decreasing frequency as the years passed. By the time Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, she was taking Dr. Muller's medicine only occasionally during the winter months when her lungs troubled her more. The disease remained dormant, held at bay by the combination of medicine, climate, and the life she and Wade had built together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the friends who had become family over the decades, Wade raised a toast to his bride. To Patience, he said, his voice still strong though his hair had silvered and lines of laughter creased his weathered face. Who came to Arizona with medicine for her body but ended up healing all our souls. Patience smiled at her husband across the table they'd shared for 3 decades, her green eyes as bright as the day they'd met, though now framed by silver-streaked hair and the gentle lines of a life well lived. The consumption that had once threatened to steal her future had instead given her an unexpected gift, pushing her toward a love and a life she might otherwise never have found. "To finding cures where we least expect them," she replied, raising her glass to meet his, "and to the healing power of love." As the desert stars appeared overhead, Wade and Patience slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand to the spot where they had often watched the sunset in their early years together. The land around them had changed, the ranch had grown, Quartzsite had developed from a dusty outpost to a proper town, but the vast beauty of the Arizona desert remained eternal. "Did you ever imagine, all those years ago, that we would have this?" Wade asked, his arm around her waist as they gazed at the star-filled sky. Patience shook her head, leaning into his embrace. "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I thought I was making a brave choice about how to spend my final months. I never dreamed I was actually taking the first step toward a lifetime." Wade turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. In the moonlight, she could see the boy he'd been beneath the distinguished rancher he'd become, just as he could still see the determined young woman who had captured his heart, despite the shadow of illness that had followed her. "You know," he said softly, "I set out to find a doctor who could cure you, but what I discovered was that sometimes love is the most powerful medicine of all." "And sometimes," Patience replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss the man who had given her not just years, but a reason to fill them with purpose and joy. "The person who saves your life is the one who makes it worth living." Together they walked back toward the lights of their home, where the family they had created waited to continue the celebration. Behind them stretched the story of their lives, a tale of a mail-order bride who came west with medicine for her illness, and found not just a cure, but a love that had healed them both in ways neither could have imagined on that fateful day in Quartzsite so many years before.